Okay, Christopher, we can start. It's now public.
Great. Do you want to give a brief hello to everyone before we get started?
Welcome, everybody. So we have a new setup this year. We want to do everything in the form of interviews. And we found a brilliant interviewer in Christopher Kardambikis. So he also coordinates the answers and questions of people. So,
hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Kardambikis, and I'll be your moderator and host for Magical Riso number 4. I'm joining you from Washington, D.C., where it is 8:30 in the morning. I'm sure you're all visiting from different places at various times of convenience or inconvenience. As this is a webinar and we are able to see in the chat window, please do feel free as guests, as panelists, to type in where you're joining us from. It's good to see where everyone is. But for this year's Magical Riso, as Yo said, this will be a series of interviews, roughly following along with the Magical Octopus book, which Yo and all of our panelists throughout the convention have put together. And it's a really beautiful package. Everyone else's is not quite as tabbed and marked up as mine is. But we will be following the book through the series of meetings. We'll be meeting here every day until December 4th. And each day we'll be talking to a new group of artists and printers who have contributed to the book. This is a Zoom webinar that is also being streamed on YouTube. If you are in the audience, you'll be able to send us questions for each participant via the Q&A window at the bottom of the screen. You can also send us messages through the chat. At the end of each interview, I will be reading questions from the audience to our Riso artists. As your moderator and interviewer, I will be keeping time as best I can. Again, we're starting here each day at 17:30 Maastricht time, and we're trying to limit each day to 3 hours max. For our panel participants, everyone who's part of the book and part of the program, if you're not being interviewed, this is just another reminder to keep your microphone on mute, as everyone will be able to hear you otherwise. And before we begin, I just wanted to thank Yo Franken and the team here at the Van Eyck for all their efforts in making Magical Riso 4 happen. I especially wanted to thank Marguerite, Anne, Leva, Hamid, and Meek. I'm very happy to have gotten to know as we've been testing this format. And this is a new format, so I'm sure there will be some issues as we go forward. And just everyone, please be patient with us. We will be speaking much about the octopus as a magic metaphor to describe the various directions and processes explored by our community of printers, artists, designers, and book artists. And the other day, it struck me that in addition to 8 tentacles, an octopus also has 3 hearts, which further decentralizes its motions. And in some ways, I think the idea that this amazing Riso animal has multiple decentered muscles animating it is perhaps the best metaphor for this community. And I'm happy to be sharing space and conversations with you. Today's program will feature a presentation by Knockvologan Studies, who have provided the source material that framed the initial explorations for this book. We will then interview Meek and Rutger of Knockvologan Studies. From there, we will take a quick break, give people a chance to stretch your legs. And when we return, we'll be speaking with Banana Fish from China, followed by Calypso Press in Colombia. And we'll be closing out the day with a brief wrap up and a final question and answer session. And as we get started with today's programming, our first 2 conversations will be with Eyck Academy, the director of the Van Eyck Academy, and Gerald Borsen from Riso Benelux. So if I can call Eyck up to the mic and we can talk.
Thank you very much for introducing the Magical Riso events. And yeah, I would like to heartily welcome everyone today at this beautiful event in a new setting, which would have been with a lot of people from all around the world. Now we are together here sharing the online space, which is amazing. Also with a completely new setting, because we have a whole new camera setting, and it's working for now. So we're super happy that Magical Riso is the first event where we can experience this. You asked me a question yesterday.
Yes.
Yes.
And it is amazing just to see this setup for the Magical Riso, and I miss being in the auditorium with everyone.
Yeah.
But what I was thinking about the other day is that you had actually started as the director of the Van Eyck in 2018, shortly before the last Magical Riso.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear a bit of a reflection on your part of the time that you've had at Van Eyck between these two Magical Riso events.
Yeah, exactly.
And further, this is obviously a very different format for Magical Riso, necessitated by the pandemic. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about the importance of the event itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the question. And indeed, I started before the previous Magical Riso event. So I already experienced one, which is great. I started in October 2018. And yeah, what can I say? What has happened these past 2 years? Nothing else than that has been a bumpy road, but it has been a very exciting one as well, where we were able to experience many, many different things. Because when I started, first we had the Riso event, and then obviously, you know, then this era or period of my directorship then started, where I was envisioning also together with the team a new course, a new direction. And we took about 7 or 8 months to develop that. And it was great to have many, many different discussions to where we should be going. And for me, it was clear that whatever we would do, it would have to be aligned to the larger issues at stake in the world, relating to climate change, relating to all the effects and manifold effects of that, and how that involves and how that affects the art practice in general. So that was important for me. And with the discussions with Jo, it was great that he immediately already put forward, I mean, the Academy was already working in many good directions relating to this, with the different institutes and the labs that we have. And Jo directly pushed forward the idea that Riso in itself is a very, very ecological way of printing, because it has the cold printing. And I didn't know that, so it was great that was something that we could work with. And the first thing that we did also in collaboration with Riso Benelux, and I'm grateful for Riso Benelux for that, is to change all of the printers that we have at the Academy and just solely work with Riso, also in the administration. And that has proved to work really well. And that's great. So that reduces the effects and also pushes us towards acknowledging the future that we want to see. And the second thing, which I find great, is that, and I said it was a bumpy road, because when we've envisioned the 7-8 months, the discussions that we had of where should we be going, then Corona kicked in March after the open studios. And then we had to change things again. And after the Corona, in May, we had Black Lives Matter. So all of these things added sort of to a pressure cooker of rethinking what the organization should be, also relating to all the different parts of the institutions. Let's say the tentacles of the octopus, if you will. You can give this metaphor also for the organization. And what I find really, really interesting is what Jo did, is that, I don't know whether Jo envisioned this before Corona. It must have been before Corona. The fact that...
Sure.
It was, right? The fact that he already had the idea of making a sort of distributed book, you know? And Corona made clear that we can't travel. And the climate change situation is also pushing us forward to rethinking our model of art practice, which is international. So what does international mean relating to the corona crisis, relating to the effects of climate change if we can't travel anymore. What does that mean for art practice? He already had that idea of the distributed book. And I think that's fantastic, because what's happening right now, we are going to share and experience this book that came together from all these different parts of the world. But the people are not. The people are still there. And so the goods are traveling, but the people are not. And that's super interesting to now be also discussing this within this online, offline environment where these different spaces are merging once again. So I don't know if that's visionary or it was a good shot, like a a lucky shot. But I think that's fantastic. I mean, these things come out of experiment and out of a wish to experiment, and that's why I want to welcome everyone to this event, and I'm grateful to Jo and to the team and to everybody who has worked really, really hard to make this event possible. Yeah, so maybe that's a bit of my answer.
Well, thank you, Eyck. It's great to just hear a little bit more of your thoughts during this time and how you see the efforts of the Van Eyck moving into the future. My last question that I had set up for you was how you see the place and possibilities of the risograph or stencil printing in relationship to the larger goals of the Van Eyck. And I do believe that you really kind of touched on that previously as well, but if there's anything else you'd like to expand upon.
No, I think this is it. I think you have all these layers of what Riso can mean for you. And I think the idea of slowing down, the idea of the artist book also taps into that. The idea of the effort you take to make a book as opposed to the constant production, let's say, pressure that you have when you're working in other mediums. I think it's important that Riso also kind of pushes that narrative, or can push that narrative, if you like. And the other thing is the community of Riso, which is a very it is a community, you know, that is invested in each other, and this is also important, I think. So community building, the slow pace of it, the limitedness of it. I think these are all things that we can learn of if we think of the wider spectrum that I was talking about earlier. Thank you.
That's great, Eyck. Thank you so much. Thank you for your work, and thank you for your insights. All right. And next, we'll be bringing Gerard from Riso Benelux into the hot seat.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning for some. Of course, we are very happy to be there for this biennale, for the fourth one, and the next 3 days, because it will be, again, on the long period compared to the first one. We can say that every 2 years, it's a sunny time with the Magical Riso, thanks to Jo and his great imagination. So that's fantastic. And I hope, first of all, for you and your family during this COVID period, that everything is okay. It's not an easy way, but finally, we can observe also that thanks to these strange situations, probably the Magical Riso can be expanded and give a possibility for a lot of worldwide artists to join this fantastic event. So they will have probably more and more participants than the previous one. That's the four Magical Riso event. Every 2 years we can observe that Magical Riso takes a big place when we can see via the social networks how it is expanded. So that's great to see the Riso community growing, and Riso is really proud of that. It's thanks to you. So we are really honored of us. And what I would like to tell you that we discussed yesterday with Christopher, it's very funny time. I work in Riso for 26 years now, in Riso France, but of course for Riso Kagaku too. And when I thought about this fourth biennale, I come back about my past, and when I was a young boy. It's really for me it's very a kind of very great anecdote that I would like to share with you a quick story. 1974, when I was a young boy, 6 years old, I would let you make the calculation about my age. Especially in my country, we don't have, or we didn't have any school the Wednesday afternoon. So the Wednesday afternoon was really cool for us because we could play, of course. It was a winter time, and during this winter time, my mom gave me the possibility to make some painting. It was really funny because we were on the living room, and she gave me a brush, a painting, and a white paper. And I start to draw some things. I tried to draw some things. And suddenly my mom left the room. And what's happened, of course, when we are 6 years old, you can imagine that the size of the white paper is really limited. So, of course, I stand up and I walk on the living room, and we had a very fantastic white wall. And with my brush and my painting, of course, I start to paint the wall. It was really funny for me. And now I'm back. At this moment, I was afraid because I said, wow, maybe I made a mistake, you know? And I was so surprised because she smiled. And she told me, close to me, you know, Gerald, we will clean the wall together. So, wow, it's really cool for me because it was really hard. I believe that it will be a very hard time, but finally that was great. But after my dad's back, and it was another story. My dad didn't understand why I couldn't paint in this white paper on the table. It was a really little hard moment. But finally, what I can see, thanks to this funny story, that's thanks to my mom. I can say that I have a part of the creativity in my mind. She let me to do what I wanted, finally. I have a kind of, I could develop my passion, my emotion. And thanks to my dad, I developed a kind of discipline and the efforts. And I do believe that the life of the artist is really between the creativity, emotion, the passion, but also the discipline. Because if you don't have a discipline, it's impossible to do this kind of book. Then you work with a lot of different artists worldwide. And for this reason, we appreciate a lot. And I think that's the common point between Riso and the artist about this mode of discipline and creativity, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful story. And I think about some of the ways that sets up ideas of play and the necessity for craft that we'll be teasing out through the rest of this set of conversations as we start to pick apart this book. And I was wondering if we could tell us a little bit about your work with Riso and how you work to engage with and support the creative artists and printers who have championed Riso printing in their creative and professional practices. As you mentioned, this is a really important community.
Of course, you know that the founder of Riso, Mr. Haima-san, and now the son, Mr. Akira Haima, is really engaged on the education worldwide. You know that we have a foundation created in 1984 for the education. And we are engaged for the education, but also for the arts. And I think the first things in order to support the artists or the arts in general is to listen to people. And we have a great example with Eyck Academy, because in 2014, when I met you, the first things I did, it was the first time, because you know that I come from France, and I'm very happy to manage the sub in the Netherlands, because we have also a great team. And I met Jo, and I could learn a lot of things from Jo. He could explain to me his vision, what he did, what was his job. And thanks to that, we could imagine together, thanks to his leadership, of course, how he wanted to go. And it was an evidence for me in 2014 that we should do some things in order to make the idea possible from you. The second point, as Hicham explained to you, of course, we commit for the climate in the Riso company, and we decided 1.5 years ago with Hicham and Jo to launch a specific plan named Horizon 21 with full transitions from the hot printing system to the cold printing system. Because Riso, via the duplicator, of course, is able to provide some products, help the artists, but you also know that some artists use also the color machine, the Inu inkjet machine, so and can play and have a mix. But in global, on the structure of the Van Eyck Academy, we could imagine a plan together in order to support this art school. Another point is sometimes we have also some partnership with some artists, or we make some sponsoring for local events. We receive some requests sometimes everywhere, and we are very happy when we can, of course, help the artist on the local presentation. Know that Riso today, it's more than 20 subs worldwide. So we have a sub, but we have also some partners locally. And we are really open to study some project around the art because it is in our blood, of course. And we know that this community is fantastic. You do some things that we cannot imagine sometimes, but it's your creativity. That's great. So by simple things, we can, of course, make special supports in order to make some kind of accompaniments and create great relationships. So I advise the artists to see where are located with the sub, and don't hesitate to have a contact with them, and let's imagine to do some things locally for you, of course.
Great, thank you, Gerard. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and thank you for being here and for all of your work.
Thank you very much, Christopher, and I wish to everybody, of course, a very great Octopus Magical Riso.
All right, and before we begin with the keynote address, we have Jo Franken coming in to speak to us a little bit about the book itself. Here you are back in the limelight, Jo.
What are your questions?
I have many questions. We're going to limit it to just a few right now, as we'll be able to frequently ask you questions throughout the program. But I wanted to start by asking you to actually frame the book itself and talk about the production of it, since we're going to be spending 4 days really within the pages of it, talking to all the various artists that you've pulled together. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about how the book came together?
Sure. It was a nightmare. But anyway, so actually the book was actually a side project to the Magical Riso as we envisioned it for this year. The COVID situation, of course, changed a lot. So, but also for the better. So in one way, I found out I was too ambitious with the original plan because the book took so much work that I cannot imagine what would have happened if both things came together. So, but on the other hand, it was very fortunate that we had this book going on. And first, I just thought about postponing Magical Riso to a better time. But then the book got more and more and more interesting. So actually, we found out that it could be a complete theme for Magical Riso. And that's what happened. So we could spend much more energy to the book than we originally would have had. And So while it was growing, new things came up. So new questions about the collaboration and so on. And it showed to be an excellent compromise in these times to work together with people still, even on a distance. And what the interesting thing about this book is that actually all colleagues, they printed the part of the book themselves. So it was not that they sent us digital files and that we produced it, but we only did the montage in the end, because then everybody could work in his own environment. That was very beneficial, but on the other hand, it also caused me headaches, because while printing, you know, Riso printers, they have their own workflow. And I tried to make it easy for them, to provide them with a template, but that was a mistake, because I underestimate the workflow of the people where they are used to, so that caused some really technical problems. And the main problem what I encountered was when once all things were here, I had to correct a lot by my cutting machine. So I had actually a terrible week, cutting 0.5 millimeter here, 0.5 millimeter there, and then you suddenly realize you are working with the work of someone else. So you really have to stay really focused not to do a wrong cut, because then the whole encounter would be terrible. So, but in the end we managed. I don't know how we did, but we managed. But we learned a lot from it, and I told my colleague Margriet and Alice, I will never do this again. But and then Margriet said, yes, you will. But so I think for the next book I learned a lot. So I really am thinking about the next program in this way, but then learning from all the mistakes that I made. But in the end, I really like yesterday that people from FESCA, they said, maybe it's the most important Riso book of this year. So yeah, and I'm very proud on that, so that we achieved this all together with all the misery that came with it.
Yeah, it's an amazing effort, and the book turned out wonderfully. And I also think that one of the things that you've been able to accomplish with this, even though the pandemic changed plans for this Magical Riso, by the nature of the book form itself being able to be distributed, and by the nature of what we're doing now with the webinar, you're able to open up the Riso community to far more people than can fit into the auditorium.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great success for this format.
Mm-hmm. That's really important, because that's also what I heard a lot from people. So that are really the pros of this COVID nightmare, that we are suddenly not limited to 150 people anymore. So I think even in the future, when we can gather in person again, I hope in 22, then this will be a part of the Magical Riso as well, just to have as much people participating as possible. So I think something good comes out of it, so I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that idea of bringing it to more and more people, we do have partners that I want to give you a chance to address and to acknowledge, FISO Fest and Bergen Art Book Fair. Can you talk a little bit about their participation in the event?
Yeah, so yeah, the nice thing was they reached out to me. So I think around September, and so I Googled a little, and I found out it was a really serious thing going on there. And I was so happy that they really spent much time to make this a success. It's actually an annex of Magical Riso, because suddenly we also reach this huge country in Portuguese. So that was a nice experiment. So I'm really happy they reached out and what came from it. So that's also one of the things that we maybe could do in the future, because after the first Magical Riso, we saw all kind of those initiatives popping up all over the world. So maybe what we do now with Veiska and Bergen Art Book Fair is maybe also a very interesting concept for the future, to combine a lot of Riso events all over the place. So maybe then we could maybe even start working as equal partners from the beginning. Yeah, so we will give that a thought, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea and a great way for this to just keep growing and expanding. Well, again, thank you so much for all of your efforts in pulling this community together and for making a space for everyone to get together in this time, and for giving everyone this wonderful gift of a book. But now we will be moving on to our keynote address, or keynote presentation, Land of Angry Waves by Knockvologan Studies. And if we can pull up their video.
Tireragan, Land of Angry Waves. Islands float free until the sea, more liquid than their magma chambers, covers the seepage and under a sickle of sky sits the sea to the shore, sharper than the cliff gouged by the ice cap. During the creation of the world, the points of the compass turn against each other. Algae multiplies, mole beds down, incessantly sandblasting the beach. The sea's clock is running ahead of us. Bays are concealed, waves struggle to mix, and mist misses, sharpness searching for wetlands and fens. The map fades into the background. Each day, spaces are pounded, the sea rends, but who is guarding who? When the rocks swell, the water recedes. The floodline becomes as pliable as a rope. Circumferences, convex and concave, go awry. The trail cuts off the island from the island. A red cloud blows due within reach. The seabed has thrown up peat. The sky checks out the colors. No tree can exist in the sky where branches winged the wind. The map grows silent and hides what lives. Nothing is legible in the transparent room, only the rain writing on the window the sky's history in shorthand. Dry, the granite will remain. There's no clear green sea that can remove it, so damp and surrounded by water, it remains rock solid, speckled, on the spots where the ice tongues disappeared. True to what appeared from the depths, the map also consists of what was lost, like the peat, cherishing the petrified wood within it, and the seaweed torn off by the storm. The power of the wind reveals the time can always be traced back to the moment something negligible was set in motion, foreshadowing the episode. From the air, the treetops seem full of birds, but time cannot be aligned. The land waits as calm as lichen. When the sea rises, the rushing seagulls prick at the waves with their beaks.
We made this Riso publication with Jo in the first year that we arrived on the Isle of Mull in Scotland. We came from Amsterdam and stranded here. And looking back on this publication, we realized that we could only have made this that first year. It's really a publication about arriving, about not knowing the land yet. Now, with all the knowledge we have 5 years later, we have too much information, so to say. Of course, we started to explore and feel the land and taste it, and we started to translate it, whereas this first publication is much more speculative. The colors, you know, are of hope, of imagining what a land is made up of. So the further research, the further translation started leading to many more publications with Yo and other works as well. We developed language. We developed a signature in the landscape that needed different ways of working. It needed collaborations. It needed other visions of other artists and researchers along to look over our shoulders or to work with. So the idea was born to start a residency.
From the beginning, we felt that this place is one to share, to build up a community around it on this edge of Europe. So we started to build accommodation for guests, for friends, for other makers. This is a small building in the back of the garden that we now call the Prism, and is the house where our artists in residence or writers in residence can stay. Next to it, we started to build shelters and other accommodation for non-humans. So we made a few ponds and stone heaps. And as soon as we did that, there came the birds and all kind of creatures. We got used to sharing material here. You see our neighbors bringing seaweed to make new soil, helping each other, swapping vegetables, became a new way of life. The terrain between the house and the barns was neglected for many years, and we started to use the materials that were there to build up a garden, from the old tiles of the roof, from the tires that were left behind. And here you see our second vegetable garden with a hedge that trees have that are now as thick as pencils, but they're still already growing enough for a whole winter. And as soon as we were doing that, we could also start with study again. And the first project we did was on a nearby island called Staffa, which is very famous because of the basalt columns. Here we are making rubbings on the site. And here you see a detail from one of the rubbings, which leads us to another field research that started with a misprint. This is a misprint of a book of the Kearton brothers. They were the first British photographers, and they were the first ones who made photographs in situ. So they did not bring nests to their studios, but they went up in the trees and on the rocks and down the cliffs. And the beautiful thing was that in their work, you can see the eggs, and we also find the same eggs around here in the same compositions and the same shapes and colors. So that became the subject for our second publication, which is called Oology. It means study of eggs. This is an egg stolen by a crow, which was the beginning of making a map and seeing an egg as a planet. We invited
a bookbinder from Germany. She made some plover paper, it's called. It's a sprinkling technique. That was also part of the publication. There are a few poems that are wrapped in this sprinkles paper. On the here you can see there in the back. There's the wrapping for the hooded crow, the guillemot, and the snipe. So for making books and making work, we also have all the time things like doing beach cleans and trying to understand more and more from Null's history. And when you walk down the path from Knockvologan, there are 2 iron hooks peeping out of the sand. And this is a buried lifeboat of a Arandora star. That was a liner ship which was on their way in the 1941 with prisoners of war, and it got torpedoed not far from Knockvologan. And we decided to, or actually we did not decide, the hooks I think decided for us that they needed a monument. And we asked 2 other poets, a father and a son, who all wrote about this Arandora style lifeboat. And now we have, this is the celebration or the book lounge on the beach around the hooks. And we did it the next year again. Yeah. Okay.
So we mentioned this already. Mick mentioned this, that when we arrived, we found a neglected mess. In a way, there's no more beautiful way to start a project just by cleaning up and getting to know the space. So we, from this area of the island, which is already notorious for its mess and barns collapsing, we transformed the worst one into what is now our residential space for our guests, a big studio. And interestingly, we found that building here is very slow. It's very difficult. The logistics are not with us, but you can already activate and use the space in its unfinished phase. So we had guests over. We've organized exhibitions, and those are really nice. I mean, there's something that the sketch phase where we are in makes conversation somehow easier, lighter. There's less pretentious atmosphere. So the farmers come visit us and talk and discuss art and discuss the future of the island, which is a bit what the kind of platform we want to build. So meanwhile, you've seen a few works pass. One was the frogs. So we asked an artist she proposed to study the land from a frog's perspective. And here is a rendering, a painted rendering of our view, which was seen through this periscope, was part of an exhibition in the Netherlands. And this is Marjolein Boter, the Dutch artist who did a research on letting the landscape paint or draw.
Yeah, so this was us compressed in a 12 minutes presentation, trying to show as many different things that we are doing. This is quite rare, the sun is shining now. We did not expect it.
Certainly our light situation is a bit dramatic. It was a beautiful gray day.
Meek and Rutger, that was incredible to see. It's great to see some more information about the island and some more of your work. So thank you for that wonderful presentation. I do have a few questions for you as well. I'd like to touch on the history of Knockvologan Studies. A couple questions I had was, when did you and Rutger first move to Mol from Amsterdam? And can you tell us a little bit more about how this opportunity came up for you?
Yeah, well, that's 5 years ago. We were here for holiday, and then we met a couple, and actually they offered us to look after a house. That's something you will, well, maybe hear once in your life. So we just immediately said yes to that offer, not knowing what it would mean and not knowing how this landscape would be in wintertime, and also not knowing really what we could do there. I mean, as a writer, you can easily you think you can easily just move and write somewhere else, which happened to be, both of us really had to learn to work and to play again from zero.
Yeah, so we were in a way offered to look after a house, but we hadn't seen the house, and we had only spent 2 weeks in this country. So when we had to decide, there was all the information we had, so we just decided to go for it and be flexible and give up our. Well, you don't really give up a network, but yeah, I had a teaching practice in the Eyck Academy in Amsterdam, the art school. So I stopped that contract, and we thought we have enough capacities to start something new.
But we first had to, yeah, what we were showing before, to understand where we were, or what it could become, and so we really the first weeks we started a little booklet, and we wrote down all the ideas that came in mind, really like very silly ideas as well. And we said, well, we will never do an artist in residence thing, because that's impossible here, or it is something we don't like. But very, very quick afterwards, it became like the solution for many things, like sharing ideas again, and sharing the landscape, and making work together about one surroundings.
Yeah, that's incredible, and such a wonderful leap to make, to jump into a new environment and figure out how to rebuild your practice and then open it up for so many more people. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how your work shifted when you moved. So much of your work focuses on landscape, and I'm wondering if you can identify a little bit more how the work itself changed when you moved to this new environment, because you mentioned the work itself becoming a bit more open with possibilities with this new space. We don't yet really have a sense of where it shifted from, I guess.
I think one major thing that changed is the border between work and not work, or say with artwork or publishing work and not work, started to blur completely. We're growing towards a setup where we're independent, like self-sufficient, but this requires so much work, like garden work and building work and cleaning work and all these things. And somehow, or quite naturally, all these events that are tied to these activities started seeping into the work. So all those hard labor, non-art related things suddenly became sources of inspiration, also fuel for the whole thing. So if we help the neighbor with his sheep, that just, you know, we kind of know that it ends up somewhere in work or in an understanding of the landscape. And having such a direct relationship with the environment and the centuries-old activities that are done here, which haven't really changed, that those are somehow related to work is something we never realized so strongly.
But there was another thing that really changed a lot, and that is the rhythm you do things, because here the weather is really our boss. So the weather will always tell us what to do on a day, or what is possible or what is not possible. And so if I now look at what we've done, you can really even see the different seasons in our work. The amount of daylight, which is now really not much, how that influences your way of working. That I really, in the beginning, it was really struggling, and I felt all the time, oh, when can I start working again? But not realizing that we were already doing that all the time, and now it becomes really more, a new very natural rhythm. And sometimes it's just you just do what is almost asked you by the weather boss.
Yeah, I love that idea of the weather as another collaborator or as another part of the workforce you need to be really negotiating with as you're moving forward around the island. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the relationship between language and landscape, how the physical landscape carries a narrative that is slowly discovered by you as you're moving through Mall, and how language can transform landscape and in turn be transformed by it. This process seems to be even more complicated by your work in translation, and even like in translation and in transgression and boundaries as you're trying to set up boundaries within your work. What do you think about that? Like as you're working with these layers of language throughout the space?
Yeah, I believe of course, Miek is the writer of the two of us, but before she says something about it, I want to say that so when we moved here, we had a van, and we drove 3 times from the Netherlands with all our stuff. But the bulk of what we took were 2 categories. One was tools, and the other one was books. So I think we shipped around like over 3,000 books to here, and we started to realize that the place where a book resides, so to say, it doesn't only change the book, which we didn't realize in Amsterdam, but it also changes the landscape. So a book, through its language or through its images also, it's really like it's a bit of an open door metaphor, but it's a bit of a lens through which you it's a tool really to look at the landscape in different ways. So the landscape influences the book in a way as much as the book influences the landscape. And maybe in your writing there's something else, something similar going on, I don't know.
Yeah, well, first coming with a different language, not understanding the old Gaelic language, which is hidden around here. It was more like really waiting and watching and going every day outside for a lot of walks to understand how I could translate all this rock formation. I mean, you have 2 words for rock in Dutch, but there are 50 words for it here, which I did not know. So it was in the beginning a lot of waiting. I have the feeling that I could not start before knowing where to look and where to construct even new words. And with learning new words, you started to see them in the landscape as well. So by learning few words for rimpling or wind on the water, you suddenly recognize that happening phenomenon on the water. also talking with people from here and sharing their stories, or it's really all about, in the beginning, much more about listening than about doing it yourself or wanting to write. It's there's a lot of tension there going on.
But when you say waiting, mixed waiting is not really waiting and learning new words. It's really being in the landscape so many hours a day. Your learning is very physical.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the language, like, changes your body, and then I think it changes your thinking.
Yeah.
So that's how
true.
I would.
And with the translation from Dutch to English, and even now from Dutch to Portuguese, which is really very special. It also suddenly the written texts, which are here as well, they also get tentacles, and they start to grow around one original. So that is really that's very exciting to see that happen. That working also with translators, that suddenly one poem becomes richer and widener in a way.
Yeah, I am personally always jealous of translators. I feel like you have access to another dimension of understanding the world just from like that one step over and using a completely different language to do so. And I love how you're talking about the idea of waiting and learning. And I'm sure that shifting a practice to being kind of still and very present in a space must have also been quite a shift for you, because it seems like you two are very active all the time.
Yeah, well, we once did an exercise in the forest nearby, and we decided not to talk for half an hour, and then slowly we started to hear, well, not just the wind, but we started to hear that the wind there where we were sitting had different points or different knots, and that this whole space above our heads was also a map of the wind. This is just one an example of little surprises that happen, that can happen here if you are not too hasty, or if you you watch out as well as you can.
Yeah. And Rutger, I love what you said about the place where the book resides can also change the book itself, or thinking about the book as a tool to understand a place. And I often talk about the book object in relationship to geography, the book as a place to explore, and the book itself as a landscape. And I was wondering how each of you got involved with book arts, and how you started publishing books yourselves or working with artists to produce books, how you started making your own books.
I think it doesn't really make sense for me to talk much about it, because I just got lured in by Mick and Jo. But you've been making publications and books for much longer. My practice was it was quite hybrid, but it didn't contain books. It was painting, installation, sculptures, and teaching, creating dialogue. So that aspect of dialogue, that's really strongly present with our residents. But for books, that's in a way still, that started here. So I'm just really happy that I can jump on the wagon with Mick and Jo sometimes.
For me, reading books and sharing books is something I do already quite some time. There's a picture of me. I think I'm 6 years old. I'm on a holiday and I'm playing library on a blanket, and I'm sitting there and waiting for other people at the campsite to come by and borrow a book. There were even a stamp system where with this little paper and the date where you would borrow the book. And then I think maybe a few years later, I visit with my dad the Planten Museum in Antwerp. So one of the famous print workshops who, well, 200, 300 years ago, and I now don't know exactly how long that was, but seeing that workspace with all the presses and all the tables where you would check the text and where all the books in the library there, I don't know, it is a very, very clear memory of that space where you felt that there were books made and what that meant, that people could read other thoughts that other people had written down, the sharing knowledge, the images that were printed there. I think it started for me with a love for books at that workspace of Plantain. Yeah.
Thanks. And can you tell us a little bit more about the residency program? Because it seems like this is where maybe the boundaries of Knockvologan is more porous. Like this is the space where you can start to talk more about dialogue and education and community, not just within the artists you're inviting, but also community with the rest of the inhabitants of the island.
Yeah. Well, like we said, we did not want to start a residency, and then it became a necessity. We started to look at residency in a different way. It's like fellow studiers, yeah. So using the different eyes or different attitudes towards environment, our direct environment, to speed things up. And I think we're not patient enough to just do the work here by ourselves. So and also, of course, we also wanted to share it. I think what we strived for was also to create common ground, quite literally, but also creating dialogue. I mean, that's happening with the Riso book. I think if the Riso book, the Magical Octopus book, did not have common material to start with, the ways that the different printers worked were harder to compare, to lay side by side. So in a way, with our residency, we do a similar thing where we ask the artists and researchers to take the landscape here as a subject, no matter what angle they take. But it makes it more possible to compare and to create an archive with all these voices that all talk about here. So I think that commonality is something I missed very much in the art world when I was in Amsterdam. And I realized that to create dialogue, you need common ground. And once you start sharing a very specific subject, at first we feared that we would almost become over the years, we would become too much isolated, and that the works will be too much site specific, and it wouldn't translate anymore. But we somehow now see the opposite happening, where super local specific work about a tiny fracture of the earth, once you start traveling with that or sharing those stories, you end up in very precise dialogues. So I think, I mean, we still have to prove it. The residency is open for 2 years. We have, this year was more of an online residency, which we did some projects. But that's the idea. And so far, I think it shows that it works. So we believe it will generate this archive of here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And I'm wondering how the residency functioned online for you this year.
Well, one we can.
So
There's one project. We found kind of a solution. So there's a Mathieu Lacoste. That's an artist from Norway, a Canadian artist who lives in Norway, and he wanted to come here in the summer. It was impossible, so we decided to meet each other halfway by walking. So he walked from Oslo to Knockvologan, and we walked from Knockvologan to Oslo. Of course, we bumped in the
body of water.
Body of water, both of us. But we tried to walk in a direct line, which was a very different way of moving through this landscape. And we are now, instead of him having here working on a project, we are now working towards a kind of a journal of maybe a leporello or a book where we are both sharing our journeys, and where we also step in each other's landscape. I mean, that's then all imagination, but we will swap now our journey documentation, and
so it's an experimentation in storytelling based on a mutual walk, him walking from, say, roughly east to west, and us from west to east. And we have regular Zoom meetings, and I think the last one we started to doubt whether we should actually once meet in real or whether we should keep it virtual. So somewhere also these meetings start being inspiring material for a publication that we're going to make in the coming months. I don't know. Yeah, that's the most starking example of some like space in between Oslo and here that becomes the residential space for both of us. So it became a collaboration much more than us facilitating his residency.
Well, thank you. I'm struck by the generosity of your practice as well. The ability to dig into the space and also to open it up to so many people. And I hope to one day be able to actually see this archive that you're building up of work about the location. But before we wrap up before the break, I did want to also open it up to questions from the community. And we have one from Afka Mertens asking, was it very hard to become part of the community there when you moved?
It's still a progress.
That's a very good question.
Really important also. It's a language question also. Like, I think we still don't even know how many misunderstandings we have had in the first years, and how many misunderstandings we're still having when we meet people from the local community. So, and that's a growing process. Of course, we generate more, so there's more ties with the community, but there must be also, as we take risks with things, as we speak out more, we must generate so many misunderstandings also, and it's difficult sometimes. Luckily, we have to say this. It's a big compliment to the local community. It's very rural here. Not many people live in this area. Sketching the area where we relate to is kind of the inner center of Amsterdam, 10 by 10 kilometers, with 30 people. The larger community on Mull is near 3,000, but that's a huge area where we never go to the north. But in that small community, we bumped into like amazing, really truly amazing people. Not just kind and generous and helping, but also really inspiring. So you find strange encounters. Like the former bus driver is also a self-taught quantum physicist. Further down the road, there's a guy, Roger. He has a satellite dish in his garden, bouncing messages off the moon with communities around the world. There is a couple who are in their 70s, steampunk couple. One of them is an anthropologist with a fascination for death. The other one is a former, like, retired philosopher and language researcher. Mm-hmm. I mean, and people here are just, I think this is, we don't know yet, but why we don't know the story of why all these people left their jobs or retired early to start a simple life here. But we try to activate all these latently present capacities, and that's a nice way to connect. And but that's that part of the community, and then the other part, say, the more the people that have lived here for many generations. I think the way to connect so far is just by helping.
Yeah.
So
and inviting them, and maybe they won't come yet, but maybe in a few years they will suddenly join one of the events. And we discovered that when there is cake, and that really helps a lot.
And also we discovered that if we like, we tend to be very optimistic about things we do, even if also, not everything works, but we try to stay positive just for our own energy. But sharing trouble here on the island with neighbors of things, you know, that failed, and we complain about it, somehow that creates much more contact, because then they feel they can help. So we learned also to complain in a way, yeah, and to suffer. Maybe that's more what we
suffer out loud.
Share your suffering, which creates bonds.
That's great. Well, Meek and Rucker, thank you so much for talking more about your work and your practice. And I believe that's all the questions we have from the audience. And at this point, we are going to be moving into a short break session. So for the next 15, 20 minutes, we'll be having the book itself actually playing. And when we return after that, we'll be talking with Banana Fish. Right. So this is,
thank you.
Thank you. So everyone, this is your opportunity to stretch, get some cake, have a bio break, and we'll check in 15 or 20.
and connects to my phone. I went to the toilet and it disconnected. But I don't think I have to do much.
I don't know. It's in a way it's nice when Christopher asks the questions because it kind of just follows, you know, the natural flow.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. But
how did he pronounce Hisham's name?
oh my God, it was something.
Hikam?
Oh my God. Yeah, it was something. Yeah.
I hope everyone had a good break and had a chance to watch the book being moved through slowly during that time. It's really quite comforting actually just to watch a couple hands move through a book piece. But again, just as another reminder, welcome to Magical Riso number 4. This is a Zoom webinar. It is also being streamed onto YouTube, which means that audience members can send us questions from several different locations. If you're here on the Zoom webinar, near the end of our conversation, you can type in questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I will read them for Banana Fish at the end of our talk. Similarly, if you're on YouTube, you can type in questions into the chat, and those will also be fed to me. And if you are one of the lucky few at the Van Eyck, the auditorium will also be open for questions for the panelists. But if everyone's ready to get started, I'd like to welcome Banana Fish here. Banana Fish Books is a bookshop, a gallery, and a Riso studio, providing the interested parties with everything related to art and artist books, including exhibitions, workshops, bookmaking, and fairs. As a team, they promote artistic readings and hands-on experiences. Banana Fish, thank you for being here with us. And do you mind introducing yourselves? Who's there with us in the chat?
Here's Wei and Qing, two co-founders of Banana Fish Books.
Oh, Wei and Qing, hello. Thank you again for joining us. To start, it is just fascinating that Banana Fish does so many things, being a bookshop, a gallery, and a Riso studio. Can you give us a brief history of the project and how the two of you decided to start this up?
We started the small bookshop about a decade ago. So selling art books from small independent publishers. We were actually the first bookshop in China specializing in these kind of small publications. And the second activity came actually the Riso studio. That's short after when we started trying to making our own books, and we quickly also met the similar problem that many others, small publishers maybe have also met, that the difficulties to printing on a big printing factory in a small print run. So yeah, that's when we started about 9 years ago, starting our Riso studio. So doing our own books, and also soon enough also helping other small publishers to print their own creations. And the gallery part came into the our setting about 2 years ago. That's when we slowly realize this, or that we want to share the book or the art book in a more in more facet than just the book on the table as it is. So we wanted to show the stories behind it, to introduce the people behind the books. So then we started with the Japanese graphic designer Katsunari Hattori. We did, that's our first exhibition in our space. We did a book design exhibition with Katsunari-san. So then we were doing monthly small exhibitions, mostly related with books. And we also sometimes have like evening events, inviting designers or others to our bookshop space, which is there. Yes, there. And to have a small, sharing. Yeah, maybe if the connection is stable.
Yeah, great to see like a little glimpse into your space, and I'm sure everyone would love to see this this tour.
Mm-hmm. So that's the. We currently have a small screen screen printed exhibition about like vegetation, but also like organs. So quite small details. Maybe we cannot see clearly on the webcam. And on the other side, this part is the is the bookshop. So quite small one, but we have quite a few of the interesting art books. And we have sometimes like the residencies. We did sometimes like small installations, or sometimes we also did residencies in which the artist did like book projects. Yeah, this is from the Spanish artist. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. This is the painting about old residential areas in Shanghai. Yeah, where the people have their private plants in the public areas. So yeah, we basically want to run a space that is small but warm and welcome for the people that are interested in this kind of small applications. Yeah.
Thank you for the tour. That's incredible. I think that this is probably going to be my favorite part of the Magical Riso experience, is seeing everyone show off their spaces in ways that we would not have been able to do so without the magic of Zoom.
So yeah, this is the studio is quite empty because we kind of just reset the space after the art book fair. So currently there's no prints, nothing on the walls. Yeah. And we got we got the first A2 machine in China. So yeah, but not really haven't started doing project with that yet.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you. To get things started, before we start diving into the studio and everything else, I want to know a little bit of your own personal histories with printing and design before Banana Fish Studio.
I started industrial design in Germany. So it's about making rational and perfect design and duplicate that like maybe 100,000 times. And but I kind of slowly grew the interest to make some things like back in the universities, one of my professors said that many of our students want to push the project in a way like to analyze and prove, which is good. But he suggested there's always another way, like to try, just to go for it and to try, and maybe you get an error, but you will learn from it. But not so many people are going for that because it's kind of uncertain. But I think I have the personal preference about looking for something. Maybe it's not as perfect, but maybe a changing, or maybe there's more. It's simply more interesting for me. So that's why I got interest into these small publications, and also I quite enjoy the running the Riso studio, not just doing my own work, maybe even more when having other people to kind of make their work more complete. So as my kind of my attitude towards the Riso practice.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that the idea of cultivating uncertainty is a really strong approach to design in general, but maybe especially in this Riso practice where things are just very uncertain as to how they're going to turn out. And I'm sure that opening up the studio to so many people and seeing how they're producing their work also reflects back on your practice and your work. And maybe as a way to start talking about your contributions to the Magical Riso book, and again, like that emphasis on uncertainty, I was thinking about how you put the source imagery almost under the microscope and zoomed in to reveal a different geography and topography to the initial images. And it does so in a way that reveals the physicality of the printing process and almost how the image itself is constructed. And it disconnects the initial images from their original place and develops almost an excavation of the printed image itself. Can you tell us more about your approach to developing the imagery?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the work from Eyck very much in a way that because it tells a story from, for me, it's a distant yet very different world, like the island. I always had this like looking towards or imagining what life is like on such place like this island, because like Shanghai is a big city and China is a huge country, but it's very different than what we have every day. So not just now, but also from a long time, always had this imagination about what these things, what another is almost like another word for me, and left plenty of imaginations to play with. And so I chose to focus in these tiny details, like small cuts or small textures in this book. It's like when you focus on something which is very different, very special in its way, and in that time you disconnect with the surroundings. So I think that's why I chose to work in only the tiny small part of the supplied images, like the black and white squill on the left side. It reminds me of her text about I think it's about a storm and snow or sand or ice storm falling on the beach on a night with moonlight, and that the wind blows the sun to form even character-like creations. So this kind of silent but very very foreign scenery for me. So that's what I see in these images. So I try to use risograph in a way to represent that feeling.
Yeah, thank you. And even just that magnification process and trying to think about how it relates to text is another way that transforms these initial images to become almost a science fictional landscape or a natural landscape or almost bodily or visceral. And you're also involved, like not just with producing your own imagery and working with the Banana Fish space itself to facilitate opportunities for other artists, but you're also working with the Shanghai Art Book Fair. And one of the things I keep thinking about during Magical Riso is the space it opens up for the global community of printers to get together and exchange ideas. And it seems that your project engages the idea of community in several levels. Your local community through the bookshop and gallery, and this community of makers in your studio getting together and producing work, but also another global community through the Shanghai Art Book Fair. And I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about both your thoughts about building and supporting community and your thoughts on the larger book world in general.
I think it's not that we supporting the community. It's more like we or the community are supporting us each other, because what we do. Actually, we had last month we had the Shanghai Art Book Fair, and then we also had a small group of local printers, local Riso printers, about 8 or 10, and some are quite new. So we had a small like Magical Riso-ish meeting, and many young studio and many very interesting thoughts and share the things they do. It's because the things we pursue are quite different from maybe the standard way of publishing or design, and we need the community to kind of enlarge the voice we have, like only with the community, like we are able to see better, like what we could realize in doing these things. Because also for us at the very beginning was like because very few young people chose to do as we started, very few people chose to do small publications. Like how are you going to sell your books? Where, how can you live with these kind of things? But slower and slower, when more people get joined in this community, and then we suddenly have more possibilities in terms of not just selling itself, but also like the more possibilities about how we how this operation are going to continue. And so I think it's not that we support the community, but the community itself acts as a big organism that everyone within benefits from it.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm sure that just seeing younger artists taking to the book form and making pamphlets, especially as you're the first or one of the first shops and galleries that are making that available, I'm sure you must be able to see just this slow but dramatic change over the 10 years that you've been in operation.
Yeah, it's actually I had a last December, I had a opportunity to visit printing plant at the fair, and then we also talked about because China maybe is a bit different because everything is a big scale, like economy is big scale and company is big scale. So there's not much room left for really small and private things like small companies or small creative groups. But within the last couple of years, through there are not just the Shanghai Art Book Fair, but also other art book fairs happening in China. So through these events, we saw a quite a bit of change, also a rapid growth of many young people doing not only doing book art, but also other creativity and craft related self-initiated projects, that which is not so common like five years ago.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you. So Wei, I would like to open up the conversation to general questions from the audience. And as a reminder, if you're in the Zoom webinar, you can type in your questions into the Q&A box. Panelists can also type in your questions into the chat and we'll get to them as we do. And if you're viewing on YouTube, we can also pull questions from that chat as well. And from the people in the auditorium at the Van Eyck as well. So we're gonna be coming at you from all sides here. And our first question is from Afka Merchants. And they're wondering how many people work at Banana Fish and if their income is mainly from printing and publishing.
We have the regular staff are just us two, and we have we had from time to time one at most like long-term employee. Otherwise, we had several interns, like 3 months interns from the universities. I think now with the art book fair, we kind of have the balance to, because of, like, I think the main difference is a rental is maybe cost as much as in Europe, and we don't as a small organization like us, it's not so easy to get fundings in China. So, but there's a bigger market. So we do some online sellings, and it's kind of okay. So yeah, we mainly make our livings by online sellings, and also the art book fair itself would give us some financial support. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question from Igor, and he asks, what do your local audience expect from art books?
I think it's in the recent 2 or 3 years, things got quite changed, because now we have because in China now everything is happens on the internet. Like you want to go somewhere, you want to go to a shop, and you see on the app like the ratings, whether it's good or not, if there's interesting stuff. And it's kind of good for us, because we have quite special books, which is not so easy to find anywhere else. Then people simply find books from the printing technique, from the binding, or from the topic itself interesting. So maybe not. We have also long-term readers that we know for many years, and into some more deeper contents. But there is a big audience group that they simply starts with, oh, this book is very interesting. So I think it's a good sign. So not, yeah, the tendency is growing towards books that are a bit different, and the books that are put a bit more efforts into.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Meek actually asks, what do you expect from this book?
The book, it's it's amazing. It's a very actually we kept half of the books that because you said we could sell some of the books, but we kept about half to ourselves. So because it's yeah, it's a what can I say? It's a may I say it's better than the one that was 4 years ago, because first from the topic itself about the island and about so many aspects of this area, like not only formal but also in a research in a kind of way, and also to see everybody's approach, very different approach towards. So it's just like the name of the project said, the Magical Octopus, that the combined entity is so much bigger than every small parts. It's yeah, it's yeah, and I absolutely want to go to the island one day when we are allowed to travel again.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure at this point we all want to go to the island as soon as we can. They're going to be adding a lot more to the archives. There's a couple questions about acquisition, actually. People out there on YouTube want to know how they can acquire work from Banana Fish. Do you ship internationally?
Like our work? Yeah, we do ship internationally because we have FedEx. Yeah. We could because a short before was the virtual art book fair in Tokyo. So and then we prepared a bit for them. We updated our website, so now you can order from what's called a perfect book for bananafish.com. It's quite a long name. And then you can order the books and we will send per FedEx. I think it's like $20 for Asia and $35 for worldwide. The postage, I think so. Yeah, because it is still quite expensive to send from China because the initial kilos are quite expensive, but after that it gets a bit better. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Then our last question from the panelists before we open it up to the Van Eyck Auditorium, if there's anyone there that has questions in the space, this is from Paul John of Endless Editions. How has it been participating in online art book fairs?
It's very interesting experience. They actually did quite many work into it because it's like a small. It's like a 3D game from the 2000s, and you can zoom in, you can go to everybody's booth, and you have this bit mapping of the books, and you can click into it. But I don't know. It's starting. It's as a starting point. I think it's very is very good. But me myself, kind of not really quite used to, because I'm the person really needs to be there to feel the interactions between the people, and so it's a bit. Maybe one thing could have been better because for the if like for the virtual art book fair, if all the publishers could send their books over to the organizer, and then because we could assume that even if it's a virtual art book fair, then the majority of buyers are located in where the organizer locates. So it's makes more sense, like all the different publishers that send their books over to the organizer, and then each individual customer would have a much better experience to have like small packages sent from, like it would be like a not international shipping, but only local logistics, which is much better. And for the things that are left unsold, I think many of us could agree on leaving them to the organizer and to wait until maybe next year or the year after next, that the whole pandemic should be over, and then we could use for the next event.
Great, thank you. I see a lot of people agreeing both by head nods and thumbs up and in the conversation in the chat. But next we also have one last question from Helen at Feiska.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great mediation, Chris. I would like to ask a question about the book. I would like to know, I was browsing the book and seeing this first page. Can you see it there? It's kind of specifically about this page. You have like you were talking about the black and white page, and
Mhm.
this is like in the verse. What I thought was really interesting was how this effect was made by the page that is behind, by the art that is behind the sky. I would like to comment on that because I thought it was like a watery effect, and ask you how you thought about these pages, like in a work that is formed by 8 pages, how you thought about the order to place these pages in this process.
It's I would think about imagining me entering this island. I took I think I took the concept into like a small world, and how I would like the journey or the tour to look like. So this is actually a small cutout from the there's actually a pool in front, but I only chose a small part and made that vertical. Looks kind of like a part from a hill or something, which is quite yeah, like a cliff. And then maybe you find a secret entrance, so then you can enter this world. And it's like walking on a beach, that you suddenly make findings among the sands. So that's where my focuses are on basically small items, but also arranged with bigger things, like the feeling, because I chose that to be printed. I'm not sure if you can see. Actually, it's not dots. It's diagonal lines. The bitmap, the rasterization are diagonal lines, which for me is like the wind that blows through the ocean surface, and sometimes they have not only the waves, but also have you sometimes you see the wind that travels on the ocean surface. So these kind of small details. And yeah, this also this like gemstones. So that's why I put that into the green and the gold. And yeah, so this is like souvenirs. So when you finish the journey, so, and I also quite like the not only from the observations of Eyck on the island, but also from so many people, like this from the old biology book, like so many people that have these studies and this research about the nature. So as a whole, so that's my 5 cents to the book.
Thank you, Wei. That was an amazing walk through this section of the book. Okay, so other questions from the panelists or from the audience on the internet, we're going to have to save until the final Q&A at the end of our day today. But I did just want to reach out to Yo and the Van Eyck to see if there's anyone in the auditorium with a final question for Wei. I see someone approaching the
No
mic.
questions here. Everybody is amazed by the wonderful book, so.
Excellent, thank you. Well, Banana Fish, Wei, and Jing, thank you so much for joining us and for showing us this beautiful space and for walking us through the book.
Welcome.
All right. And our next guest visiting us from Colombia is Calypso Press. And let's get you up here in the spotlight. All right, is this everyone?
Yeah. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. So just to give everyone the same background for Calypso Press, and I'm pulling from the information in the book here. Calypso Press was established in 2015. It is a small risograph printing studio, a publishing label, an artistic collective founded by Eva Parra. And while I'm saying your names, jump in and correct me. I don't want to mispronounce everything, and I know that I will. And that goes for everyone for the entirety of the 4 days. Eva Parra, born in Spain, 1982. Camilo Otero in the USA, 1983, a good year. That's when I was born. He's based in California, in Cali, Colombia. Calypso Press specializes in the production of artist books and publications. The main threads running through their practice vary from art and fermentation processes, visual culture and labor, illustration and design. Calypso also hosts a residency program oriented to editorial experimentation and printing investigation. So again, Calypso and everyone here, thank you so much for joining us. As we start the program, I just want to briefly ask where everyone is actually joining us from. We have several screens pulled up large here. Where is everyone?
Well, Camilo and I, well, I'm in Cali. We are in Cali. I'm at the Calypso Press studio.
Excellent.
I'm also joining from Cali. Oh, sorry, Martin. Go ahead.
I'm joining from Amsterdam.
Excellent.
Yes, and I'm also in Cali, but from another station.
And would you mind giving us, do you want to give us a little bit of a tour of your space as well, or show us where you're at?
Yeah, Eva can do that.
Yeah, well, we had everything prepared for this tour, but we have a little bit of a catastrophe yesterday. Our studio flooded.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so it is really chaotic, but I can give you a tour, but please excuse the chaos.
There's
so
no
this is where
from the group here.
I'm gonna try to, okay, so this is where we work. I don't know if you're able to see it very well. This is our Riso. This is where we dry. And yeah, so everything is on the floor and such. We have this station here where we finish our books. And we usually have kind of like a showroom here. But now we had to take all the books off, so you're not really able to see anything. So I don't think I should be showing you this. We have another station, but that is a total mess and total catastrophe where we finish our books, where we have like our staple machine and cutting devices and things like that. But I think I'm going to save you that.
Well, thank you for the brief tour. Again, like this is wonderful just to see people's spaces and where you're working. But to get into Calypso as a group, I wanted to ask how Calypso came together and how your individual practices work towards the goals of the collective. And this is also an opportunity to talk to you individually about your individual practices and histories with printing and publications.
Perfect. Camilo, would you like to start? Maybe?
Okay. Well, we met, Eva and I are Calypso, and we met over, I don't know, 12 years ago in university. And, but we studied arts in Madrid. And while we were there, we met Beto Galbao from Melimelo. This was in 2014. And well, we got really inspired. Actually, we met him during an exhibition. We had a well, we converted our house into an exhibition space. It was like a small apartment in the center of Madrid. And we did different activities that came up during our master's degree. And that's how we met him. We set up a little exhibition with our zine collection. And it was during the Madrid Art Book Fair in 2014. And he came over to our apartment and he started to talk us about the Riso. We actually didn't know anything about Riso before that. And the funny thing is, like a few months later, he said, Magical Riso 1 is happening. And do you want to come over? And I actually went, and that's where I met like the community and the whole, the Van Eyck and everyone around. And we got really inspired. And in 2015, we moved from Spain to Colombia. And we started our small studio. We actually bought a Riso in Spain. We brought it over to Colombia. And we're suffering the compatibility issues since then. I don't know if you want to add anything to our introduction.
Yeah, so the connection is that when Camilo went over to Magical Riso, he met Martin, and we've been working and being friends with him since then. And I don't know if specifically like the personal, I don't remember very well the question, but you were asking about personal interests. And yeah, so we both studied arts and philosophy, but for me, for example, this Calypso Press has been like a platform to develop some fermentation experiments and in relation to publication or like more like expanded publication. And I think that, well, that's something that I use Calypso Press for. But the other thing that has been like really nice to have has been this residency program where we can have, where we have hosted some artists and cooks and architects and people with very different projects, and that's been really inspiring. And one of them was Martin Laroche, and now maybe you can step in here.
Okay, I can say that it's true that we all what they said is true. We met with Camilo in a corridor at Jan van Eyck during the first Magical Riso. And it's funny because I don't consider it so much, but then Magical Riso has like actually had a central role in how we have been meeting each other. So yeah, it's the fourth event of Magical Riso. Now I can say that it really has changed my friendships and life in a way. And yeah, in 2016, I went to Cali to visit Camilo and Eva, and I did the printing residency, and it was very incredible process because they don't just host you, but I can imagine maybe also in relation to Mick and what they are doing in the north, like it's also getting immersed in the city and what is happening in the surroundings, and also what is happening with the printing culture in Cali as well. So Camilo and Eva don't just work with the Riso, but they also use Riso as a way also to approach different other techniques, older techniques or traditional techniques in Cali's culture.
That's excellent, thank you. And maybe we can use this as a way to actually talk a little bit more about your ideas around the expanded publication and a bit more about this residency program, because this idea of being able to work with a larger community in Cali, as well as being able to open up this experimental approach to printmaking and a residency that also involves like cooks and designers and all this. I feel like that becomes very expansive. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about the residency?
Okay. Well, basically, we ended up turning this into a residency because we had many people over visiting. It was, I remember before in the introduction, they were talking about how it was a necessity, a need to have a residency. I kind of think the same. Being connected with a community, not just with a local community, but with people coming over and interacting and exchanging ideas, is something like really important and enriching. And I think that's something that we've managed to maintain, at least until this year, because of obvious reasons. But basically what we have is a place like our home, which is half studio, or maybe 60-70% studio, and then living area. And we have opened like this space to people to come over or visit, participate in various projects. So basically someone that we know or we're interested in their work, we contact them and we approach them in order to try and come up with a project. And the idea of them coming over, if possible, makes the residency a reality. We live in Cali. Cali is the third city of Colombia in dimensions, like in population. And even though it's a big city, we've got nearly 3 million inhabitants. It's also like the infrastructure is not something like really amazing, especially mobility and yes, roads and everything are difficult to get along on them. But the thing is, we live in the outskirts of the city, and actually going inside the city is it's like a 1 hour trip or something. So we live like very near the mountains. We live actually by a natural park called Farallones, which is like a natural park in the Andes mountain range. And it's like a bit of a tropical rainforest over here. And it contrasts a lot with the inner part of the city. The reason why we decided to specialize in a print-in residency is because there's a neighborhood in Cali called San Nicolás, which is like kind of an open factory. It's full of little workshops with different types of printing machines and finishing machines. So you have to go to a little workshop and do the I don't know, some sort of printing, and then another one for the finishing, and another one for the trimming, and so on and so forth. So it's actually a very physical experience, and also establishing some sort of relationship with the people that work there, establishing a trust relationship with them, because this district or this area is really focused just on production of prints for advertisements and like commercial work really over there. And it's interesting to go there and kind of change certain dynamics or interact in order to accomplish certain details that you want, because that's not the way like they normally have been working. So you have to start some sort of negotiation with them in order for them to take more time to do the things, be a little bit, maybe pay more attention to details. So you end up really connecting with certain people that you are able to empathize with and to connect. And it's quite a big district. I mean, there's quite a lot of little workshops. So it's also some sort of research project just to go in and find out what's happening inside. It's not something that you find really open in the beginning. It's not like there's a sign at the, like on the door saying this is what we do and you're welcome. You have to go in and kind of struggle a bit sometimes to engage with the local community, and that's been really fun. And also bringing people from the outside and being able to share this experience with them is something that has been fun and part of our project.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like one of the things that is coming out in our conversations and is not quite so obvious by just the term DIY or do it yourself is that when you are taking on production of publications yourself in a way, it actually is reliant on a larger community of people. So we are never actually doing anything ourselves. We're always working with people and getting to know their stories and having to build community in order to make these books happen. And I wanted to talk actually a little bit about the imagery that's in the book that Martine and Calypso produced, because this is a beautiful section. And I wanted to get a little more insight into the production of it. Martine, you've developed a wonderful visual language to deconstruct and remix the initial imagery. And it's a very poetic approach in more ways than just the introduction of the new text and verse. And I was wondering how you developed this visual language as a group.
You know, paradoxically, like yesterday, Calypso studio was completely flooded. So there was a lot of water everywhere. And our first impression of mixed materials for the book were that we were like in the middle of an ocean of a lot of information and images. And we had like to digest through many days, like all the information. And we had very amazing and wonderful conversation also with Mick. To also, we had some questions about everything in a way. And there was so many that in a way it was very interesting because it was super rich. And at the same time, Camilo and Eva asked me if I could help them with an image. So it was also very interesting to work in a very tentacular way because I was in Amsterdam, Mick was in the north, Camilo and Eva were in Colombia, and then they were sending what they were printing to Joe in Maastricht. So there was all this triangulation of moments. And so at one point it was difficult to know exactly how the outcome was going to come. So we had to also trust on everybody. And so I somehow initiated the process because I said to Eva and Camilo that I was very interested also in the poetry of Mick. And we talk about using this poetry or maybe also referring to the text because it was very tempting to work just with the imagery, just with the images. But we wanted somehow to also include the poems, but in a way that it could also have a dialogue with the images. And we talk of this idea of being underwater. So we weren't clear of where we were going. We were moving slowly. There were like things that were slowly like coming down. And if you allow me, I just want to read just few poems that we included, because we included even fragments, not the entire poem. It takes me just like 1 minute. A few hours later, when the fog has cleared, decay is now here to be seen under. New sounds seem to be added every minute. Will they settle on me too? Particles, the soft waves that precede the flip or a large wave. And we had this very interesting conversation with Mick in which we were talking about how weather and landscape was a very huge influence in different cultures, particularly for poetry. So there had been in many different cultures, like in Japan, in China, there was also like in Colombia, in the north of the UK, also in Ireland, in Scotia. Like there were many different places in which like there has been a genre in poetry related to weather and landscape. And we were very interested about this and how also Mick was also like a contemporary revisiting these genres. And we wanted to include it somehow like in this in a material way. That's why we also played around putting the words in a little bit the other way around. So we scattered all the letters. So we wanted to introduce these poems in a fragmented way, but also that it demanded some effort from the reader. So it felt almost like if you would be underwater, as Calypso Studio is now a little. What would you say, Camilo and Eva?
Yes, the interesting thing there is that also, as Martin was saying, being a process happening in so many places and like bits of the process happening in so many different places, the fun thing there was that every step of the process was a new experience. Like, for example, Martin coming up with the images and the ideas, and then the printing, and then the finishing, like transformed the actual product in different moments. So it was something that we were involved with, but we were also surprised by in different at different times. And yeah, I really like that idea that you have to struggle to read. For example, Martin was struggling to read just there, and that effort from your part to have to really get involved really relates with the idea of the climate, but also the idea of the underwater world, and at least for us humans, no, to be there. So yeah, that's something I could add.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a deceptively simple operation that reveals much complexity. The idea of just altering the orientation of the text, because it creates a dissonance with the image and really does slow the reader down and opens up a different type of space for them to be contemplating the book and that section of it. And we've been talking about slowness quite a bit here throughout the conference, and that's come up several times, not just because of the pandemic, but the idea of trying to slow down in the work. And I'm wondering if that's something that you think about in terms of the residency and how you work with artists to foster an experimental program, is how you allow for time.
Your mic.
Yeah, I think you're there. You go. Now you're unmuted.
No, I was saying that is a really interesting question because our residency program it's an open one. In the beginning, as Camilo said, it was more like friends coming over, or people that we had some affinities with. We're not really friends then, but like the first goal was to become friends. So we don't have a specific time for that. And we have had things like some people coming over for just 1 week and making a whole book there. And we have also had people for 6 months here, and they have done nothing because they just needed to slow down and they just needed to try things and fail, and that it's okay. Like we don't have we don't put so much pressure on the people that come here. We allow them to search.
And I wanted to add that here there is like this kind of saying that when you ask someone when are things going to happen, they say, yeah, like when the sun comes down, because sun can be really intense and heavy. So it has for us also been this learning process since we're here in Colombia to kind of slow down and understand the processes and the times and the dynamics of people, and actually when to really get annoyed because something is not happening, or when to give it enough time for it to happen in its own time. So yeah, it's been like a nice learning experience, I think, for both of us in that sense.
That's great. Thank you. So at this point, I do want to open up questions to the audience, and we have a few coming in from our panelists now. As a reminder for anyone in the audience through the Zoom webinar, please do type in your questions either in the chat or the Q&A. And questions can also come to me from YouTube as well before we open it up to the auditorium. And our first question is from Anfia. They say from PN Press. They say, it's very nice to hear that you guys are hosting the artist residency over there to establish relationships and connections to people in the world. And they're wondering, is there lots of practicing printmakers coming for the residency, or is there mostly designers? Or is it in fact the artist collaborators that you had from all different backgrounds and disciplines?
Cali has since the 60s and 70s has a big printmaking tradition. Actually, Cali, also in art in Colombia in general, had the first museum of modern art in the country, and started the first experimental printmaking biennial events during from the end of the 60s until mid 80s, more or less. So there is a big tradition here in printmaking, and that you get workshops, printmaking workshops specialized in printmaking, and others that are like more towards commercial printing, like just offset printers and what I was talking about, this printing district. And it's really interesting for us to kind of mix both, to go to the people that have an art point of view and thing, artistic point of view and things, and let's say they are like they have this knowledge of printmaking, but also more self-taught and not so rigorous printers, which is what we normally have in the commercial printing district. And all this is to link with the question, because we do like to mix different people with different ideas and also different backgrounds. So we don't really specialize on having printmakers over, although it's something nice and that we have had. But we do like people that have maybe no idea on what, how to print or how it is, to also go through the process of printing and finding out how it works. I'm not sure if Eva wants to add anything to that.
No, I just would add that we're open to anyone that has a project and wants to develop here. So yeah, we have had lots of artists, more like illustrators and artists and some cooks, but yeah, but not a lot of print makers.
I also would like to add that, like talking about what I was saying about that we've had more illustrators and designers than actual printmakers, but before, when we used to live in Spain, we had a more maybe conceptual approach to art. And since we've been in Colombia, because the art scene is really focused, well, in general, towards drawing, designing, we have actually shifted, not because like a conscious decision, but because we've actually met a community that's really focused on drawing and designing. So less of like conceptual projects and more like drawing illustration projects.
It's also great that you can take all these people from varied backgrounds and turn them into printmakers through the process of the residency. Thank you. We have another question from Knust, and they ask, are you there all the time during printing? Camilo and Eva.
Yeah, most of the time. I don't know what they refer to, but yeah, yeah, as Camilo said, we have this studio and house. We're about to move actually, but we're going to be living on top of our studio again. So yeah, you know how this goes, like you work 24/7 sometimes.
And if they refer to, are we during the printing process when we work with other people, most of the times, certain processes we can delegate, certain others we have to be there, like from the beginning till the end, if we want the result to be what we're looking for.
Great, thank you. I'm going to turn this over to the Van Eyck Auditorium. Is there anyone there with a question for us?
Seems that it's very clear to them.
Okay. Well, Calypso Press, Eva, Camilo, and Martin, thank you so much for being part of this conversation and for joining us. It's great to just hear more about your residency, your practice, and the contribution to the book.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to you.
All right, and now
And thanks to Mick. Yeah.
Yeah. So that concludes the interview portion of the program today for Magical Riso. We would like to open this up for a bit of a closing Q&A. And as a reminder, we are doing this until the 4th. So we have several more days of the conference to be getting together and talking about the work and digging deeper into the book itself. This is really just dipping our toes into the waters. Really, we're at a shallow stage of the book, and I'm really looking forward to digging deeper into what everyone else has produced. And what I would like to do is just open it up to general conversation pieces from the community. If there's anything that you'd like to put out there while we have the entire panel together. And Yo is raising his hand first.
We have an interact from Mick still to do.
Oh, yes, I am so sorry.
Okay.
Meek, you have the floor.
So Mick and I did some catering for you for the 4 days of the webinar. So you can expect a little treat every day.
Rutger and Meek, thank you. That's an amazing dessert
a
and palate
question
cleanser.
about this.
And the food at the Van Eyck is certainly something that I absolutely miss
There's a question.
from Magical Riso. So I'm so glad that you're providing that service for us.
I have a question. What is it? What is the dessert or the sweet?
The sweets are made of chocolate, and could you bring the? It's in my room. It's hanging on the door. It's one of the sugar kelp. So they are this large brown seaweeds, and they are a little bit sweet. So we thought if we would cover them with chocolate, and we would just tear the chocolate off, then you have a bit of a saltiness to them. And I think, could you find them achter de deur, op de muur? Nee, op mijn kleine kamertje. Jouw kamer, jouw printer. So, well, yeah.
Just.
But these can become like almost 3.5 meters large. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
And the print that we passed over the table with both our hands, that was actually a Riso print we did with Jo, gluing together six A2s.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a real size seaweed.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I would love to open up this for questions about the dessert. If anyone has any further questions before we open up to the rest of the panel and a community conversation.
I have a question, but we can't see. You can't see me now, I think, because we have a. They can see me. Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I can't see you, so I'm doing this blind. So Mika, you were talking about, or you both were talking actually about how the body changes when you enter a landscape. And I can adhere to that. I think that's super fascinating, as I also live in a rural countryside. How could you bring this back to the city? Or does that pose us sort of a distinction between what cities and rural landscapes can be? So whatever you have in a rural landscape can never be in a city, and vice versa. What would you propose?
I think there are more things. So most of the currents of money and of goods, apart from maybe food that is produced in the countryside, most of the goods and knowledge goes from a city to countryside. And I think there is much more that we can ship from the countryside in experiences and knowledge that is indeed applicable in a city. Not easy maybe, and not too obvious, but one thing I keep thinking about when I sometimes travel back to the Netherlands to teach is understanding a bit more of what your community is. Maybe that doesn't talk so much about the body, but it does talk about tentacles and where you relate to. And just hearing the presentations so far from Calypso Press and the banana fish is how they in cities, although it's on the outskirts for Calypso Press, how they have such a deep understanding of their community, and I think that's really inspiring. And I don't know if it makes sense what I say, but I think there are these kind of things in how you relate to your direct environment is something so obvious in the countryside and not so obvious in the city, like knowing your neighbors, but also knowing the ground you stand upon and its history and its nutrients and etc. etc.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. It definitely makes sense. I like this idea of bringing the goods from the countryside to the city and establishing maybe a way of doing this, or maybe also practicing this idea of how the body relates to landscape or to space in general. No, I like this idea. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think from here we can open up to general conversation with all the panelists. I'm sorry, Yo, did you have a?
Yeah, in connection to the seaweed, I have a story. It's what Mick said before, that the landscape changes the books, and the book changes the landscapes. So that actually that big print we made 100% with 6A2s is actually the third book we made in the series. So first we started the series in a very structured way, like the same size, the same amount of pages, and so on and so on. And suddenly Mick came with this huge seaweed, and she told me it was really life-size. It was really long, I think almost 3 meters. And then it made us actually change our concept completely. So it was actually changed along the way because Mick was so enthusiastic about it. So we left all our principles just to make that seaweed as a publication. And I had a hard time to do that because you have to print all the A2s on one day. Otherwise you have color changes. Every Riso printer knows that if you make a spread and you make that on 2 different days, then you can have nasty surprises. So we worked like hell to get it done all in one day to make it the colors fit. And then we had to glue also for a couple of days, just to glue 30 of them. But we managed, and that's when working with Mick, you are very privileged because she gives a lot of energy. So even when I'm resigning, then she says, come on, and then it's been done after all. So that we had done with big energy triggered by Mick. So it's I'm really happy with the outcome of that because I never saw a thing like that before. So thank you, Mick.
Thank you, that's lovely. I love the idea of Mick energy infusing a book.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we do have a couple of questions from the larger group that we can put out here. And Anfia asked a question for me specifically, but I think I'd like to open this up to everyone for conversation. They say there is not much discussion about the similarities and differences in between risograph and printmaking in terms of both technical and conceptual aspects. Do you think risograph can be considered as a contemporary printmaking technique, in parentheses, yet? So I'll take a first crack at this and just say that absolutely, I think risograph printing deserves a place alongside every other printmaking process. A little bit of my background is that I am an educator as well as an artist. I teach at George Mason University in the printmaking department and printmaking and book arts. And I find that risograph is a contemporary printmaking process and tool that I think right now almost is the best for developing a larger access to the printmaking technology for the most amount of people. The availability of it, the ability for people to understand what it is and to start working immediately also means that more people can start distributing work further and further and faster and faster. And for me, a very important part of printmaking is that distribution and a democratizing of practice and process. But that's my very brief answer. And I'd love to hear a little bit from the rest of the panel if anyone else would like to weigh in on the relationship between risograph and other older forms of printmaking.
Well, can I address
Yes,
this?
please.
My background before I started at Riso was rooted in offset printing. And I remember that the first time I worked with Riso, it was a very liberating feeling, because suddenly the technical aspects you couldn't control 100%. So you could actually relax. So it was, for me, it was quite liberating when you compare it to the high-end printing techniques. Whereas then you can more focus on the content, because you don't have to worry about all other aspects of printing. You don't have to work with enlarging glasses and standardized color things and so on. So that is, for me, the big difference. And I don't want to get back. So I want to use them both, but I don't want to get back to only offset days. So I don't know how other people experience that, if there are more people that also come from other techniques instead of risograph, or if they just started with risograph, I don't know. Maybe someone can comment on that.
And I'll say another thing too, again, as an educator, and so much of the way that I use the risograph and see it function is through the lens of our students. And because of its ease of use, it allows students to find an introductory process into the printmaking studio, and then they dig further into other processes. So some students can come in and be attracted by being able to work quickly through the Riso and end up producing etchings. So it is an entryway into this history.
I would like to say something. I just want to comment like on our particular situation here in Cali. As you were saying, for me, it's also really important that printmaking is something accessible, and the aspect of democratization. And sometimes we have to deal with something, and sometimes it bothers me a lot. Here we have this situation where it is sometimes cheaper and more accessible to print something in offset or other media, because we have to import everything from the States, and we don't really have Riso suppliers here. So sometimes, not every time, but sometimes we end up being like the luxury option. And that goes a lot against what we stand for. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
That's interesting to hear, that
Yeah,
the Riso option is the expensive one. So yeah, really nice to hear that.
Actually, Eva, we have another question for you from Igor, for you and Camilo. In what ways did the local Cali culture influence your art and design practice?
Well, I think it has influenced a lot. And maybe I can't even see in which ways it has, because I'm already immersed in that. But as Camilo was saying before, time and patience has been like a key thing in our process. But something that I would point out is that I feel that we live in an environment where trust has been broken, and it is kind of difficult to build. And I mean, you have to build that trust with people you work, and that is a process, sometimes a very, very long process. And then when you have done that, you can start planning things out. And I would point out that we have had to learn how to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. I'm sure that process of rebuilding trust in a community is a hard one to be doing.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can now.
Okay. I have a question about the media the medium of Riso printing in general. I just heard about this cost aspect, that it might be more expensive in some countries, But I was also thinking, is it a medium that is only used in the artistic field, or is it also used in other fields? Or just wondering about this idea of exclusivity and what it portrays when you see the Riso print. I mean, when I look in the book, it looks almost like a drawing itself. And I'm wondering if you see that as a positive aspect, or yeah, how accessible or generally used is this medium? And wondering if it can be valuable in other fields as well.
Can I maybe suggest, Sebastian, can you comment on that? Because you work also in a very advanced way with the risograph, actually maybe also competing with offset. So can you comment on this?
Yeah. I guess if you're looking at it from an outside point of view and you don't know anything about Riso, you know, the machines are designed originally for a really low cost way to produce throwaway copies of things. So if you're an office and you want to make 10,000 copies of a memo that someone's going to read and toss, an incredible machine for doing that, and is really, really inexpensive. But on the other end of that spectrum, yeah, you can really spend a lot of time dialing in the machine and utilizing overprinting and lots of colors and different things and techniques to, you know, produce artwork as well and stuff like that. But yeah, I think about this all the time actually, because how do you sort of price some of this stuff sometimes? Because sometimes somebody just wants 400 copies of their menu for their restaurant, you know, but then on the other hand, you might have somebody asking for, you know, a 4-color, super tight registration art print that is sort of a different thing entirely. So you can kind of use it both ways and approach it in different ways. Like our studio in particular has sort of, I guess, more of a lean towards the commercial side, since we do mostly work as a service printer for other people. But we focus and try to focus mostly on art and design related sort of things. But we also get requests for, like I said, menus or just general copies of things. So, you know.
But so I know you spend a lot of time in trying to get the risograph to perfection. Is it never a problem when you have a discussion with the client that the expectations do not meet Riso quality?
Yeah, we don't go for having perfect stuff. That's not really our goal. At any point in this whole thing for us, we haven't been like, how can we make this a perfect process? Because that takes away from the appeal in the first place. But sometimes people are coming from an area where they just had their photo book printed with 6-color offset and they want to do a cheaper version, and they're trying to use risograph for that. And I have to be realistic and have a conversation with them and let them know that, you know, what to expect and what you're going to sort of get with it. Because if you're just looking to do risograph because you don't want to spend the money on letterpress or offset, it's not really a good reason to use it. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but.
Of course, I just want you to have it said.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely a bridge that needs to be crossed with meeting expectations and stuff like that, and making sure things are clear with people. But yeah.
I have a comment based on these the economic analysis that we are making of Riso. I think there's a couple of things happening here. I guess you can make cheap copies with Riso. At the same time, you're using it for limited editions of books in which you put a lot of time in. So if you would compare that to how people use offset, then Riso would be an expensive option, because all those hours you would put in would cost more. At the same time, Riso is used by people that want to invest those hours. So for themselves, those hours are not calculated, in fact. In situation of Calypso Press is a different one because it's expensive because there is no access to the cartridges, and there's no access because offset is the predominant industry for which you have more distribution options. So basically, you could look at Riso a different way if you like. And one of the ways I look at it, and I try to do this with Jo as well, and also with Riso Benelux, is first of all to look at the quality relating to ecology. That's one, because of its cold printing, and also because of it's actually a cheap way of printing, because we're using it in the Eyck Academy also for the administration. And it's much cheaper than, let's say, laser print or inkjet. So in that sense, I just want to open that up a bit, because I feel that, first of all, there's always the distinction being made between offset and Riso, whilst they're completely different, in fact. That's one. And the second thing, I feel that Riso has so many more capabilities, and the fact that it pushes you to another way of working, which means your investment into the product, all the hours that you put in, means that it's much more a lifestyle or a way of living, a way of working, rather than, and that's also connected to the way your community works, or the community of Riso works. And I think that's a predominantly a very important factor that should be calculated within what we are discussing right now. So maybe we can open it up also a bit this way. Maybe Jo, we've been having discussions about this.
I'm so happy that my director says all this. So
Unexpected?
No, not unexpected. No, but that's true. And that's why this community is so interesting, because in a way you have to be a bit crazy. If you see, for example, the book we now produce together, it would actually be unaffordable when you really had to calculate all hours and efforts you put in. This never could have been sold to someone. And that way I'm also happy that we just distributed the edition, and I always also was impressed by the nice gesture that Resolve did to just say, well, we have so few copies, we might as well give it to libraries that more people can enjoy. So yes, Hisham, commercially this will never be something that we really can make money with here.
No, but that's how you define commercial.
Yeah. But
you see what I mean? It's also about access, and building communities, and also about the attachment you have with a product, which you don't have with offset. And it's also about, if you give that access, it means also partly education, and it means bridging these, let's say, these gaps that we have, knowledge gaps that we have. And I also feel that it's easier to access Riso, actually, than it is to access offset. This is very true. So I think those all add to the qualities of what it is, and with that we can redefine of what commercial means. You see what I mean? From an economical standpoint, actually. Anyways, yeah. Did I cut you off, Jo?
Yeah.
I hope I didn't. Sorry.
It's nice, but we also have to we also have to consider there are many colleagues out there, also in the panel here, that really have to make a living from it.
Sure.
So
sure, I understand.
So it's interesting to hear their dilemma, the dilemma between working as an artist and that you have to make a living from it. I see that Seb is raising his hands. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. Yeah, so there's 5 of us here, and we're all working full time. 2 of the people that work here work almost full time, and we all make our living from it. We don't have any supplemental outside income. We're not subsidized. There's no grants. There's nothing. So everything that we need to survive comes from having to charge prices for printing and stuff like that. So finding that balance is probably the most stressful part about this whole operation, and being able to charge appropriate prices for people so that it is within reach for, an artist or something like that. But at the same time, really accounts for how much time is involved in some of these projects. Like if somebody wants 50 books and they're 4-color books and they're 8x10 and 44 pages or something like that, it's quite a lot of work actually to print these things. And so sometimes also that difference between what somebody will charge for an art print versus a book is a little skewed and off as well. The amount of work that goes into producing a zine is it's a lot of work actually. And you can only really charge like half the price of what you would for an art print, which might take only a quarter of the amount of work involved. So trying to find balancing on prices and stuff like that, we're trying to come up with different systems. One thing that we came up with is for people that can't afford to have us do the work for them, we actually have a machine now just for the purpose of self-service printing. So if you set an appointment, you can come in and print it yourself. And that's one way that we're trying to deal with that balance, I guess. So anyway, that's it. Sorry.
Do you assist those people who want to print themselves? Because then you also have an instructor job. Or do they already know how to deal with it?
Yeah, we're working on that plan right now. I don't know yet exactly how to approach that because there is going to be for sure a level of training involved. But for the most part, we're trying to keep it really simple. Sunmi, for example, is our pre-press technician now, and she's trained on the machine and she can jump over to help people as needed, sort of a thing. But yeah, the idea is that there's going to be introductory workshops that are fairly short and really low cost that would take maybe 5 or 6 people. They'll get the initial training on how to use the machine, and then at which point they can always come and make an appointment to then use the machine on their own.
Okay. So, Christopher's back, but I have maybe the same question to Freya. I see Freya looking at, there you are. Because you also use the risograph commercially in your studio. How are you dealing with those things?
So yes, we do also commercial printing, and we love the interaction with some illustrators or printmakers, and we give them a kind of basic introduction to the risograph, and we help them with the prints and how to do the pre-press. And actually now this week we had someone, we already know the machine, so we don't have the startup again. And she works alone and she makes now 5 posters. And at the end, she said how many prints and how many colors, and we know what the price will be. And it's cheaper than if we print her posters. And also the designers and the illustrators who knows a lot about Riso, and they make designs especially for the Riso. They love to print with our machines. They love to do something else than drawing or illustrating on a computer, or they love to print half a day or something. And if we print for other people by our own, we have a price tool, but it's always a little bit searching for the right value, but I think we are already there.
Sometimes a struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have something from Meek as well, saying it would be interesting to talk about how people afforded or justified their participation in this time-consuming and not-for-profit project.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually a part of the discussion. You mean this book project? Our Calypso book. Yeah, the thing was that last December I asked people if they would participate, and there was a big yes for all the people I asked. And then I think in the spring, when it got really serious, then I had a discussion with 2 of them, and it was about financial thing. So they thought they couldn't afford it to do this because they had to make their living and so on. So they were out, and then only one other dropped out later. It was time related. So, but the overwhelming majority was really very cooperative from the beginning. And I noticed while the process went on, in communicating with them, they got more and more enthusiastic. It's like the book got more and more important along the way. So, of course, I think it was a financial sacrifice for all the people who were involved. So maybe someone can comment on that, on the commercial or the financial problems by making the 8 pages. So it seems nobody had problems with it. Good.
No problems at all. It was great to work on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see the problem.
So you could afford it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't expensive. The only thing you have to do is take your time.
Mm-hmm.
The paper isn't so expensive, but maybe it's a difference that I print myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me the most time, maybe, and some masters, but
mm-hmm.
I think at the end you have a very specific outcome,
mm-hmm.
and you have to realize that it's more than the time and the money you put into it. The result is far more specific and special.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And Seb, you had a comment, yes?
Yeah, Lindsay and I were really honored to be included in the book. I mean, it's a huge honor, and the book is amazing. I mean, it's so beautiful. So at no point have we regretted doing it or had concerns about it, but you know, it didn't cost a lot in terms of materials, but in terms of time, it costed quite a bit. I mean, it was, for me, I think I spent something like 38 hours printing our submission between colored profile test charts, test printing, and then the actual run. So that's my only comment on that. But otherwise, I mean, all of it was really enjoyable. Seeing it come to life was really good experience and everything.
But it's also your own choice to make it so complicated, because you have made those beautiful, incredible pages, which cost a lot of time. You also could have chosen for a simpler way. So
yeah, like if Yo had picked a different subject, like octopus is my favorite animal, so of course I'm going to go all out on it. If Yo had picked something like squirrels, I probably would have only done like 2 or 3 colors. So yes, that was a choice, and I still stand by that choice. But yeah, I'm just saying in terms of time, it can add up, or at least in my case, it did.
Seb, I won't ask you to show your tattoo, so don't worry.
Oh, okay.
It's on the back.
Thank you. Yo, we also do have a question from the Q&A from the audience, from Travis Schaefer, that I could put out to the group. And Travis says, I'm very curious about where the growing popularity of Riso as a style starts to be in conflict with the ethos of the Riso community.
With the what? The egos or?
The ethos.
Oh,
the ethos or the philosophy of the Riso community.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Because they have big egos, so I thought it was.
Yeah.
And what is the ethos of the Riso community?
It is a very good question to open up with as well. If we can come into a group agreement of what our ethos is, and then talk about how the Riso style can come into conflict with that. But maybe another way to think of it is thinking about Riso as a style rather than a process, and what that means for people who are risograph printers and artists.
George, I'm sure you must have a comment on that. No? Okay, Christopher, you have to answer this question yourself.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering about how to pick apart that question. I almost read it, and please someone correct me if you feel differently, that is almost talking about a commodification of a style to be deployed by people who are not producing prints with risograph. And am I offering a misreading of this to anyone here, or if anyone finds a problem with condensing the process of the Riso down to something that can be commodified or purchased at like in a way that is not got about through the actual production of the imagery and in the artwork. Turning risograph into like an Instagram filter or something, I guess is how I read that.
I mean, that's been the boogeyman for all 4 Magical Risos. I don't know that I've ever seen it come into fruition in any kind of meaningful way. But I also don't know that the risograph community is unified enough for there to be a standard ethos to rail against. I think every printer has their own approach and their own line and their own sense of how things should or shouldn't be. And I don't think it's possible for that individualism to be overtaken by this like larger fear of a commodification. But I don't know, that might be a pretty naive read, but.
No, I think you're correct, George.
So Christopher, I see our Japanese friends, maybe they're suffering because it's in the middle of the night for them. So maybe we can call it a day for today.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, everyone. We did go about 30 minutes over, and we'll try to keep it to time tomorrow and throughout the rest of the time. But thank you for being here, and thank you for participating. And I'm really looking forward to talking with you again tomorrow.
Yeah, see you. Thanks for today. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.